Hey guys, welcome back. Thanks for tuning in. Today we're looking at acquisition versus conscious learning. Now, they're two tools, or they're two methods, I should say, of learning a language. So let's break them down, understand them, then you'll know how to apply them when you give advice to your students. First, acquisition. That's sort of absorbing the language. Then we've got conscious learning or focus learning. This is where we're really trying to pick up something. Both methods are very important. We're going to check out the video. By the end, you should know a little bit more, and I'll come back with a summary as always. Thanks for joining me for another mini lecture. This one is on language acquisition and language learning. Now, for many of you, these two ideas might sound synonymous, but as teachers, we really need to know the difference. First of all, language acquisition generally relates to the idea that language learning is more of a subconscious process, an almost effortless assimilation of linguistic knowledge. If you think of a child learning its mother tongue, you will understand the notion of language acquisition. Language learning, on the other hand, is more of a focused endeavor that requires a conscious knowledge of the forms and structures of the language. Here it might help if you think of a typical second language class where attention to form, structure, and explicit instruction is often given. This seems fairly straightforward, right? Exactly. But people still debate the merits of each for second language development. Now, this talk won't focus on that debate so much. Instead, I want to show you how both of these ideas can be combined to help teachers help their students more effectively. But before proceeding much further, I want to draw your attention to a few points that are worth bearing in mind. First, research shows that humans possess separate implicit or procedural and explicit or declarative memory systems. Second, the way children learn their first language and the way adults and older children learn a second language is vastly different. This is partly because the wiring of a child's brain is very different to that of a more mature individual. This is not to say that naturalistic learning, i.e., learning without formal instruction, can't happen. Of course it can. But as teachers, we need to be aware of these differences so we can best help our students. 3. It might be useful to pair explicit instruction with implicit or subconscious learning activities to expedite language development. And 4. To expedite second language development, there should be some level of noticing or attending to the stimulus and paying attention to its specific linguistic features. This is where a teacher comes in, both in presenting structures and also teaching students how to notice things in their passive study away from the class. Now remember, passive study is study that you engage in when you're not really focused on learning. For example, watching TV or listening to a news report in the target language. You're engaging with the language, but you're not actually studying. So, now I've given you a few things to mull over, let's start the discussion proper. In this talk, I will argue that both language learning and language acquisition are needed to aid language learning. This is largely based on the idea that we learn some things better using our procedural memory or via implicit learning, and other things we learn better using our declarative memory, i.e., focusing on the language. Now, in this lecture, I'm not going to discuss the strong, weak, and no interface positions on how explicit knowledge becomes implicit knowledge. That's a little too linguistic-y for this lecture. All I'm going to say is that both implicit and explicit learning activities should be used to help our students. So, let's first of all look at the role of focused or explicit learning. It is probably fair to say that with almost anything we really want to learn, and learn well, we're going to require some type of coaching, feedback, and practice. So why would learning a language be any different? Research shows that focused learning, especially with teacher intervention, is beneficial to language learning. From instant feedback, explicit instruction, and providing a level of accountability to the students, a teacher is of paramount importance when learning a language. And I would say that the most important thing to bear in mind when teaching relates to the way we teach a language. Too often, teachers think that a language is just a set of rules and words that need to be remembered and combined in order to produce language. They think that if they just teach a rule, the student will internalize it and then regurgitate it at the perfect moment. And as anyone who has been teaching for a while understands, this is simply not the case. And this is why the way we teach is important for language learning. In other mini-lectures, I've discussed the importance of inductive and guided learning, the role of explicit instruction, and the aim of using language in meaningful ways to enhance language development. I've also covered the importance of ensuring that the content is relevant, interesting, and at the correct level for the students. This is because all of these things will have a huge impact on the results you can achieve via language learning and focused study in your classrooms. Turning our attention to acquisition, I should inform you that I think the acquisition process plays a very important role in language development. This is because in most cases, the more a student engages with a language and the more comprehensible input they get, the more readily they achieve proficiency in a language. But how does language acquisition work? Well, the idea that acquisition is just, hey, watch lots of TV and you will learn a language, this is not exactly true. No, there are many rules that govern the acquisition of a language. The main one being that the input must be comprehensible, and for improvement to take place, the input must be just slightly beyond the student's current ability. Acquisition also comes via using the language to participate in acts of communication. It should be known that language acquisition is not achieved by disengaging and just hoping you will learn. Not at all. Acquisition requires a student to focus. Focus on the content being delivered and focus on deciphering its meaning using their current knowledge. As a teacher, you must encourage your students to engage with their study. We should help our students learn how to learn. If I can teach my student how to acquire language without opening his or her textbook and just pick things up, then my student improves and I look good. We should challenge our students to keep their eyes open and their ears open to the opportunities of acquiring language in their day-to-day lives. But some of you are saying, Josh, is this really acquisition? Sure it is. Maybe not in the truest linguistic sense, but if you are noticing things and figuring out their meanings, then you're acquiring knowledge. And of course, acquisition can be very passive. I myself watch Korean TV shows to aid my Korean study, and each time I find I learn a new word or phrase. And this type of incidental learning is done without really focusing, so I've just acquired the knowledge. And also, if you've listened to my discussions on reading and listening, you would have heard about the research on listening and reading for enjoyment and how these approaches, or passive study, have positive effects on language development. So team, to sum up, it is important to make sure you are harnessing the benefits of language acquisition and language learning to best help your students. Learning can take place via implicit learning and explicit instruction, and may be intentional or incidental. And because of this, you should be encouraging your students to switch between focused study and passive study. Focused study to help correct mistakes, introduce new concepts, and draw the student's attention to certain language features, etc. And passive study to help your students get the required amounts of input they need to facilitate language development, while at the same time allowing themselves opportunities for incidental learning. And as always, make sure you are encouraging your students to engage and use the language they're learning as often as possible, especially in real acts of communication, and this is regardless of how they learned that knowledge. So that's it, guys. We are done. Just remember, language learning and language acquisition are really just two sides of the same coin. So there we have it, guys. Another lesson done and dusted. Well done. I hope you acquired some knowledge. Now remember, acquisition is just being aware, trying to absorb, but it doesn't mean not focusing. You have to just really remember what your target goal is, and it is to learn a language. So keep your eyes and ears open. As we said, focused learning, 20 minutes, an hour. Just really encourage your students just to dedicate that time
just put everything aside. Turn off your phone, turn off your computer, whatever. Focus on learning. Use both tools, put them together, and your students are going to get great results. Remember, we'll see you next time, and keep English real.